Calling to order the regular board meeting of April 7, 2022. It is now 4:37 p.m. Please call the roll.
President Herrera,
Here.
Vice President Chavez. Here. Clerk Cortese. Here. Member Lay. Here. Member Doe.
Here.
Welcome to everyone. I'm getting myself oriented here. Are there any members of the public who would like to provide public comment to the board on a closed session item at this time? Seeing none and hearing none, we're going to recess to closed session. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the board meeting of April 7, 2022. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands. Thank you, and again, a warm welcome to all of you, both present in this room and participating online. If you wish to make a public comment, you may raise your virtual hand in Zoom to request to speak and offer comment in real time. In-person public commenters will be allowed entry 3 speakers at a time in the boardroom. Upon conclusion of a speaker's public comment on the agenda, the speaker must exit the boardroom. You may also submit your public comments online by accessing the form on the district's homepage at ESUHSD.org or the link on the agenda. Please reference the agenda item number in your written comment and limit your written comments to no more than 1,000 characters in length. Public comment submitted online will be read into the record. And please note that all our board meetings are recorded. All regular sessions and special meetings of the board and board study sessions are streamed live on meeting nights and are also available for viewing the day after the meeting by accessing the district's YouTube channel listed on the district's webpage at ESUHSD.org under the quick links section. Now, the board is not able to respond to items that are not on the agenda or to anything pertaining to staff personnel issues. Your comment will be read into the record and will be directed to the superintendent and or the appropriate staff member for response. Interpretation of this meeting in Spanish and Vietnamese can be heard by accessing the link and following the instructions shown on the agenda and the district's website. With that general informational comment and opening, I again want to welcome you to this meeting, and we are now at item number 5 on the agenda, adoption of agenda. And this is the point at which any board member or the superintendent administration may request that something be changed as from the published agenda. And I see nothing being requested. Moving on to item 6.01, staff building equitable communities. Associate Superintendent Marquez.
Good evening. It is with great pleasure that today we recognize the following Eastside Union High School District staff as they strive toward equitable communities. First, we recognize Debbie Fuji and Scott Young teachers and athletic directors at Santa Teresa High School. And kudos from the Eastside Teachers Association President Jack Habner read as follows. Thank you for taking the time to recognize Santa Teresa teachers and athletic directors Scott Young and Debbie Fuji. Debbie and Scott are not just teachers, they both coach sports here. Debbie coaches swimming and diving. Scott coaches both cross country and track. I have been a teacher and a coach in this district since 1997. I know how taxing both can be. Scott and Debbie are passionate about their students and they are passionate about their student athletes. What impresses me the most about the two of them is their passion for the entire athletics program at Santa Teresa. All sports are valued equally and are treated in that manner. Last year was the COVID sports year for high school sports. I reluctantly came out of retirement to help the boys soccer program as they needed a coach at that last minute. The support that Debbie and Scott provided me was amazing. They were very tolerant with my lack of understanding of the changes in the way the athletic programs were being managed. Their support went above and beyond, and it allowed me to focus on helping to rebuild the boys soccer program. Last year was so enjoyable that I decided to return to the soccer program this year. The amount of things that they both did to support me and my student athletes was incredible. Thank you, Debbie and Scott, for all that you do for the students and coaches at Santa Teresa. Congratulations to Debbie and Scott. Our next honoree is Bernie Favela, health clerk at Evergreen Valley High School. And kudos from the principal read as follows. Evergreen Valley High School is lucky to have Bernie Favela as our health clerk. She brings an unparalleled sense of compassion to her work with students. Throughout the pandemic, Bernie has helped keep EVHS safe and healthy and is always willing to step up and help support wellness on our campus in any capacity. Parents and students report that she is kind and understanding, particularly with students who may have sensitive health concerns. The staff know that she is always ready to respond to medical emergencies and always available to answer any questions they may have. I know that Evergreen Valley High School is a safer and healthier campus because of Bernie's efforts, and I sincerely thank her for all her hard work. Congratulations to Ms. Favela. Our next honoree is Ms. Rosalind Yip, Attendance Secretary at Mount Pleasant High School, and kudos from the principal read as follows. I am recognizing Rosalind Yip for her hard work and dedication to the staff, students, and families at Mount Pleasant. In addition to her regular duties in attendance, Ms. Yip is also an integral part of our COVID-19 notification system to the district and to our families. Additionally, when we are short-staffed, she willingly steps in and provides additional support where needed. Ms. Yip continually works hard and plays a vital role in building equitable communities at our school. Thank you for all that you do. Congratulations to Ms. Yip. Our next honoree is Ms. Florence Cisneros, Special Services Administrative Secretary here at the Ed Center. And kudos from the Director of Special Services read as follows. Students, families, teachers, administrators, and staff are fortunate recipients of Florence Cisneros' experience, knowledge, and kindness. She is the heart of Eastside Special Services Department. We have all learned from Florence. She has taught us processes, procedures, and perspectives at all times leading through example. Her work is defined by the fact that she truly cares about students with disabilities, their families, and the educators who support them. I appreciate this opportunity to express my gratitude to Florence for her exceptional contributions to our shared work. Congratulations to Ms. Florence Cisneros and congratulations to all our honorees for the month of April.
Thank you very much. And yes, the moment of recognition is so well deserved. And this district does strive for equitable communities. And you just heard just some of folks who are on the front lines to make this a reality. So thank you. And we're going to move on to 7.01, which is our Student Governing Board Representative, Paula Escobar. Is Paula? Yeah, you're right here. You're with us in person this time.
Board President, can I excuse myself for personal issue and I will be back.
Sorry, could you say that more
Yes.
clearly into your mic?
Yes, can I excuse myself for about
Yes.
35, 40 minutes and I will be back.
Okay, sure, go ahead. Paula Escobar.
Hello, everyone. So this week at the Student Governing Board meeting, we reviewed some bylaw changes. I want to thank the Independent Student Governing Board team for really getting that running and for drafting a new set of bylaws. And they have been continuously working and drafting those up for our Student Governing Board to move forward. As some of you may know, we're taking some applications in for the Student Governing Board for next year. So if you go to like most of the school sites, with the exceptions of Evergreen and Independence, please check your emails because there's an application that you can fill out to be considered for a place on the Student Governing Board next year. And we really hope to expand the Student Governing Board accessibility and make sure that all schools are equally represented on our board. So let us know if you have any questions, and we're really excited to onboard a new team of Student Governing Board representatives for this upcoming year. A big topic that we talked about this past week was also around Title IX and sex education. Many seniors right now this week are taking sex education courses, and us, the Student Governing Board, had a discussion on what we can do to improve these sex education standards within our district, and also make sure that all students are getting this type of education earlier on instead of, like the last months of senior year. And so we really want to work to ensure that these curriculums are not only inclusive, but that the voices of survivors are listened within our district, and that students have a place to know their Title IX rights, and that we're educated on these topics of sex education from an earlier age. And we hope to have some more follow-ups with this, as a big topic that SGB has identified as a problem within our district, and something that we will be continuing to work on for like the remainder of the year. That's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our Student Governing Board representative, Paula Escobar. Moving on to item 8.01, and this is where board or administration can request any change in the items under this section, operational items or board discussion and or action. Is there any request? I see none. We're going to proceed with the agenda. Well, that takes us right to item 9 on the agenda, 9.01, which is to hold a public hearing for disclosure of major provisions of the proposed tentative agreement for contract reopeners with the Eastside Teachers Association. And I do have a request from Jack Hammer to address this item. And Mr. Hamner is the president of the Eastside Teachers Association, and as such, he is accorded up to 5 minutes for his comments.
There we go. Good evening. Thank you for having me, allowing me to speak. I just wanted to say something real quick. I believe we're voting on the contract that we had a tentative agreement upon. I sent the data over to, I think, all of the district administration. That it was 95% in favor of approving it, and 5% that did not approve it. There was 881 ESTA members that voted. So that's a pretty overwhelming number. I wanted to thank everybody on our team, Hernan Diaz, Gwen Dixon, Brandon Rosado, Becky Hopkins, and myself, and the district team, which was Glenn and Ron, Tom and Ron and oh my gosh, Naomi, and I'm missing one, Jenny Davis, and then Rogelio. Ever since maybe about 2 years ago, we've all made a very concerted effort to improve the way that we have done things with management, ourselves, and how to be better towards each other, how better to work with each other. And our contracts over the last 4 years that I've been here in this position, I think the way that those have gone speak for themselves. We have now never had retro issues, always been able to complete contracts on time. And if we were to look at the amount of time that it's taken to get the contracts done, it's been amazingly quick. And we've gotten a lot of good things for both sides. It's been great to work, find the middle ground. And I think everybody, obviously, you can see that our side is happy with what we've had so far. The votes have been very good. So I just want to thank everybody. And I sure hope that when you all figure this out and have to, approve it, that there isn't any hesitation, stamp of approval, let's move on. So thank you. I appreciate all that you do.
Appreciate your comments, Mr. Jack Hamner. This is a formal public hearing. I forgot to do a little bit of the protocol, which is to gavel the public hearing open. And I'm now going to ask if there are any other speakers during this public hearing. No request I see, and no one else in the room. So therefore, I will call for a second time as per our protocol, and still seeing none, I'm calling for a third and final time, whether there's anyone who wishes to speak during this public hearing. Seeing none and hearing none, public testimony on this matter is now closed, and we move on to item 9.02, which is discussion and/or action to ratify this tentative agreement with the Eastside Teachers Association. Is there any comment that the administration wants to make?
Aside from thank you to both teams, with the motion was I wouldn't say easy, but it was relatively fast. It was friendly, very informative and productive. And so, Hamner said this is the ratification of the tentative agreement. Motion sessions.
Thank you very much. Members of the board, comments or a motion?
If I may, I'd also like to thank both groups, including Becky Laguna for her incredible work on that team as well. Gotcha. And so, but I would like to thank both groups for thinking about just in terms of building our equitable communities, about how we value staff and how we also account for programs, so to make sure that the services that we provide for our students are there and that our employees are respected and able to function in our economy here in the Bay Area. And so I just want to thank them for doing really sound work together to arrive at an end that now allows us to, for 2 years, to not sit across the table from each other, but to really do our best work, which is teaching and learning and moving our students forward.
The comments, members of the board, or a motion? Moved by member Chavez, second by member Cortese. We have board member Brian Doe online, right?
Yes, I am.
All right, and with member Lay temporarily out of the room, we normally would ask our student board representative how she votes, but matters concerning contracts and compensation, they're not able to participate in that vote. So I'm going to, at this point, simply call for a vote of the board. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, abstentions, and it passes unanimously. So, Mr. Jack Hamner, we just passed it unanimously. Well, the four who are present, but there is a unanimity among the board. And again, thank you to the Eastside Teachers Association and also to our staff who made this possible to get to this point. Moving on to item 10, which is public members who wish to address the board. And we do have comments, both written and live, I think. So Ms. Gillen?
Public comment online from Dolly Pham, community member. SJPD does not need to be on campuses.
Whoops, new microphone. Microphone.
Who's Brian?
We're having a little audio problem, but we're soon going to resume.
Public comment from Dolly Pham, community member. SJPD does not need to be on campuses. Community building, extracurricular activities, and other activities that allow for student participation are a better deterrent and consequently a better solution to preventing student conflict. Police are necessary to the functioning of student life. Public comment from Martha Street Art Night, a grassroots collective community member. We demand that Eastside Union High School District continue to keep SROs/cops out of schools. Bringing cops back won't repair trauma, solve systemic issues, or prevent fights. Instead, it'll lead to students being profiled, led into the carceral system, and put at risk. SJPD have shot over 60 people in the last 20 years, most recently, Quan Green. The pandemic exacerbated existing traumas of our community. Our students experience death of loved ones, houselessness, lack of attention due to caregivers that are frontline workers, all while navigating challenges of adolescence. The ESSJ community is also the worst hit by COVID cases and deaths in the county. As adults, we have more life experiences and tools to process and adapt. Imagine what they are feeling right now as youth. Are they being cared for, housed, fed, heard, loved? There's more to our students than the labels put on them. They are whole human beings that deserve dignity and the right to be at school to learn and connect in a safe, nurturing environment. Public comment from Jessica Quinn, community member. Please don't bring police back on campus to the schools. It does not prevent the violence. It only exacerbates the punishments and furthers the cycle. Please devote more resources to mental health counselors and other support staff. Public comment from Jessica Gutierrez, staff. I am writing to ask the district board members maintain the decision that SROs not be on schools. National and local data demonstrate that police presence at school is harmful to student well-being and creates a hostile learning environment. Let's continue to work towards mental health and social emotional development, restorative and transformative justice, anti-racist and culturally competent practices, and build meaningful relationships within our school communities. Police do not keep us safe. We keep us safe. Public comment from Janelle Pereira, community member. We do not want cops back on campuses. The funding used to pay for the cops should be instead put towards counselors, mental health supports, and community resources. Public comment from Samantha Trung, student. Will there be any sex ed learning that's required for all the classes besides the seniors? Public comment from staff member Nick Hill. We demand that ESUHSD continue to keep SROs/cops out of schools. Bringing cops back won't repair trauma, solve systemic issues, or prevent fights. Instead, it'll lead to students being profiled, led into the carceral system, and put at risk. SJPD have shot over 60 people in the last 20 years, most recently Quan Green. The pandemic exacerbated existing traumas of our community. Our students experienced death of loved ones, houselessness, lack of attention due to caregivers that are frontline workers, all while navigating challenges of adolescence. The ESSJ community is also the worst hit by COVID cases and deaths in the county. As adults, we have more life experience and tools to process and adapt. Imagine what they are feeling right now as youth. Are they being cared for, housed, fed, heard, loved? There's more to our students than the labels put on them. They are whole human beings that deserve the dignity and the right to be at school and learn and connect in a safe, nurturing environment. Public comment from Rithika Ramesh, student. Hello, members of the board. I'm writing today as a member of the Political Activism Club at EVHS, seeking to bring awareness to sexual assault on campus. While I understand that the district is limited in what actions they can take, I believe that the response has not been adequate. Many of us feel scared and uncomfortable, which should not be happening, as schools must be a safe place for all students and faculty. I am writing specifically to push for comprehensive sex and consent education for all grades, not just seniors. And schools should do this by inviting organizations such as Planned Parenthood for speaker events. Since EVHS specifically recently had the BMX anti-hate rally, I assume that this request is also within reason. We hope you will take the current allegations seriously to bring justice to the victims. Thank you. Public comment from Sharat Lin, community member. My name is Sharat Lin. I am a board member of Human Agenda, a 20-year-old nonprofit organization that serves the East Side. I urge ESUHSD to keep police off campuses except in the rare circumstance when the safety and security of students, teachers, and staff is threatened. Police should never be routinely stationed in a school. Scarce school resources need to address potential mental health issues and social alienation, particularly in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, and not perpetuate the school to prison pipeline. Thank you for providing a non-threatening, non-punitive environment in which students can grow and learn. That is the end of online public comment.
Very much, and appreciate all those who took time to send in their comments for the record, and we have read them into the record. Is there anyone else who wishes to offer public comment?
Yes, if we could unmute Joanna Goldsmith.
Hello,
Yes, Joanna, you have 2 minutes.
thank you. Good evening. My name is Joanna Goldsmith. I'm a science teacher at Santa Teresa High School. You should have received letters from our school site council and other concerned parties regarding our ongoing science building project at ST. In response to our concerns, we've been told that it is too late to change the plan, and if we try to delay this process, we may miss our chance to have a building at all. Rather than try to convince you to change the plan, I'd like to state for the record what went wrong so that it hopefully won't happen again. The main issue with this project was lack of communication at all levels. At our site, we went through several years where administration did not communicate properly with affected staff about ongoing projects and our needs. I cannot comment about communication at higher levels, but given where we ended up, I'm going to speculate that there was little oversight to make sure key stakeholders were being properly represented. Another issue with this project is the chosen design. We requested 2 science classrooms and a makerspace. The plans we're currently working with call for smaller, science-ready classrooms and a student commons. A student commons is neither a classroom nor a makerspace, but in our case, it will have to serve as both. It is not enough to white out a label on a design and assume everything will work. I realize that the last few years have been challenging at best and many changes have taken place. However, no one along the way looked at these plans and thought, wow, that's an odd shape for a classroom. As a side note, you all need to rethink your definition of what it means for a room to be ready for science because these rooms aren't. This is new construction and it should have been designed to fit our needs. Instead, we will have to modify our instruction to fit this building. This was a chance to create a space that our staff and students would have loved. Instead, we will receive something we have to live with. These rooms will not be usable for 2/3 of the science classes we offer. The students assigned to these rooms will not have the same learning experience as those in our other science rooms. Those students who requested a makerspace will have a room design that makes little sense. I appreciate the work that Julio Lucas and the architects have done to try to make this building design functional, but they can only do so much. In my opinion, this building will be inefficient at best and a waste of taxpayer money at worst. I guess we'll just have to live with that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any other comments?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth and I'm a community member. I've lived in San Jose for the last 8 years. And I'm here to urge the board to not allow police back on campus. I'm gonna talk from my personal experience as someone who's half Black, half Latina. Growing up, I grew up in Oakland. I grew up with my family teaching me to always be wary and watch out for the police, and for good reason. My dad was, when he was a youth, when he was 14, he was taken up, him and his cousin, to the Oakland Hills and being by the police. When I was in the 6th grade, I had 2 officers point their guns at me and my sister when we were on our way to school. And there have been numerous other things that have happened that have traumatized me, traumatized my family, and have traumatized Black and brown people for generations. And so it's really unfathomable that you would consider bringing police onto campus around students who have similar stories to mine in terms of being traumatized by the police. There have been countless reports of police attacking youth, and I've seen a lot of stuff like that growing up, and it does traumatize you. I get panic attacks when I'm around police officers, and it's just always really difficult. Like, I can't imagine like trying to be in the classroom and having them on campus. Like other speakers have said, like youth have been going through so much with the pandemic. It's really, feel like unfair to have youth just continue to be in an environment with the police on campus, and just have like just to have them like live with it and accept it. Oh, like you're gonna get traumatized, you're gonna get terrorized, like just deal with it, accept it. When we can instead be paying for nurses, we can be paying for psychologists, counselors, to better support our students. And I think it's really important to do that. Thank you.
For your comment, any others? Well, I believe that is the end of comments under item 10 of the agenda, public members who wish to address the board. Seeing and hearing no other requests, I'm going to move on to item 11.01, which is discussion and/or action regarding update on the novel coronavirus, COVID-19. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you very much. As we do in all of our meetings, we will report out on where we are with COVID-19 and our response. As always, we'll show our dashboard and our up-to-date numbers. We will include the new mask mandates, even though it has not changed since the last presentation, but just so that it is available to the public, it's included here, as well as the ongoing safety measures. We did make a change in field trips at our last meeting, and pleased to see that a couple groups did participate in out-of-state functions and were very successful and came back safely. So good things, and we'll continue to talk about next steps, some of which are being worked on tomorrow for distribution for next week. So previously, when we met, this last time we looked at this data together, this was the 7-day rolling average across our county as of March 17th. The 7-day average rolling cases was 171. As of yesterday, we had a slight uptick at 183. So definitely below the previous spike. But as we have been monitoring this data, it has been kind of going up and down. And that is why we monitor it, to see if there is a significant change. In deaths, once again, this is another item that the county looked at and the state looked at in changing the mask mandates. And once again, I want to reiterate that this is cumulative, not on a 7-day rolling average. And the last time we looked at it was 2,180. And currently we're at 2,228, so 48 more deaths in our county since the last time we met. This is where we continue to see the subtle growth, but still consistent growth. We now have over 90, or previously we had 90.4% of our residents ages 5 and up vaccinated, with 68.9 having received the booster. Currently at 90.7 and 69.6. So we're seeing that consistent growth. And we remind people about the importance of vaccination, given this slide. This is the excuse me, the case rate among 1,000 residents in our county over at the 7-day average. And previously we saw that of the unvaccinated rate for ages 5-8 was 73.6 over a 7-day average. And for vaccinated folks, only 12. That number vaccinated continues to decline, and it was from 12 to 9. And our unvaccinated case rate is at 32.5, which is also lower. So once again, encouraging folks to get vaccinated. We always pay attention to our district COVID dashboard. This is kind of for us locally. We did see a slight uptick from the last time we were together on March 17, where we had 3 positive staff cases and 11 students. As of today, we had 4 positive staff cases and 24 students, still hovering around 0.1% across our system. And while these numbers go up and down, this once again, this is a 10-day count, not an average, but the count over the last 10 days of positive cases. In many of these cases, some of these 24 have already turned to class because they tested negative with an antigen testing and are asymptomatic. Our vaccination rate for staff is 82.7%. And once again, I've included these masking guidelines because we did move to strongly recommended for indoors and not mandated. So we've included it here for the population, for our community to see, as well as our ongoing safety measures in terms of what we do in terms of providing testing and masking equipment and other PPE, the ventilation and the filters that we use, as well as the availability of mental health and wellness supports. I mentioned earlier that we did change our field trip process, and we're pleased to see that our schools are being very judicious in making those trips and offering when appropriate, those opportunities for students. And I want to thank the students and those organizing for testing before and after. And in the case of the 3-day out-of-state trips, taking that test 3 days after the return as well. We really appreciate in getting that opportunity, that taking full responsibility of guarding their health and that of the community by testing. As we mentioned before, we'll continue to monitor this data. We'll continue to locate, secure PPE testing and masks and all those equipment. One thing that will be happening tomorrow is that our schools will be receiving antigen tests for all students, and we hope to distribute that next week. Each site will communicate with its community about when it will be distributing them, so that tests are available as we move into spring break and return from spring break. And each of those boxes, I do believe, contain receive.
This time around, it's 1 test per box, so each student set will receive 2 boxes.
All right, so used to do the 2-in-1, now it's 2 boxes, but still 2 tests available for our students. Thank you, Mr. Wynn. There's no need to pass a resolution this time, but just want to make sure that you're aware of the data and our continued response to COVID. And this has been a year unlike any other. As we look back when we returned from the summer, would we be in person or not? What would the rules be? How would it go? And while I can say in talking across our system that first semester was challenging on a lot of levels for folks, it's good to see that side of it and supporting each other well as a community. Thank you. There has been a request to reschedule the June 9th regular board meeting and move that meeting to June 6th, 2002 for its regular board meeting. And we would need a motion and vote for that to occur.
By way of explanation, there's an irreconcilable conflict of one board member who has to be out of town on June 9th, and that's not negotiable for that board member. And we're making a change this will be for a regular meeting of the board, rescheduled from June 9 to June 6. And that's the matter on the floor right now. So comments, questions, or a motion?
Comment is that June 6th would ordinarily have been the meeting of the student governing board. And so we have talked about the possibility of moving the governing board. We're thinking the previous Monday, but that's a holiday, it's Memorial Day, so then which is May. So I just wanted to check with our governing board member what your thoughts
I think we've moved them to Tuesday in the past because of similar conflicts, or just because of the weird like Monday schedule thing. So that would work totally fine in terms of like scheduling the student governing board.
I think I know there's at least one graduation that night. I think most other graduations are within a few days after that. So in some ways it might actually be better because with the student governing board, because on June 6th, I think some of them would have already graduated, right? So
So the SUPS
you're
office.
saying that you don't foresee that being an issue.
Yeah, I know Evergreens is June 1st. And so I assume that like most graduations are going to be like within the last week. And so I think having it on like the 7th is like extra security that there's not going to be a graduation. I just don't think that they're going to have it that late. Like, I don't know if other schools tend to do that.
So May 31st is likely.
And so our office will communicate with Paolo to confirm and then get the word out to all members of SGB.
Members of the board, we have a motion or other comment?
I'll move to approve.
Moved by Cortese, seconded by Chavez, and again with member Lay out of the room temporarily. All those in favor, please say aye. Oops, on this one, we do ask our student representative, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Yes, student rep votes yes. Members of the board, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions, passes unanimously. Moving on to item 11.03 on the proposed, to adopting the proposed 2022-2023 board meeting calendar. Mr. Superintendent.
So what's before you for vote is a calendar for the 22-23 school year. What this does do is that in alternate months going, instead of holding 2 board meetings a month, that we go from 2 to 1 to 2 to 1. This should allow for our schools to resume making their presentations around their goals and what wonderful things they're doing with students, as well as manage the workload of 2 board meetings per month, and freeing staff to work on other priorities as well, while still making sure that in order to make our meetings accessible to the public, that they don't go into the later hours of the day, which occurred in the past, and it made a bit rather unrealistic expectation for the public to stay in tune after 10 o'clock, 11, and sometimes up to midnight. So while we're not going back to just 1 a month, we're going to a 2-1-2-1 schedule. And we're asking for your approval this evening for that.
Moved by Cortese.
Second.
Chavez. Mr. Doe, what was that?
I said second, but I think someone else beat me
I'm
to
going
it.
to give the second to member Brian Doe.
Very nice, very kind of you.
Moved by Cortese. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, who's the board member and how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. And members, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes unanimously. On to item 12.01, a discussion action to receive first reading of proposed amendments to board policies. And I do have a request to, well, that's right, we need to hear about that. And then I have a request to speak. Associate Superintendent Marquez.
Good evening, Teresa Marquez, Associate Superintendent for Educational Services. So today I bring to you an update for a first reading of board policies 5144 and 5144.1. Normally, the process that takes place is the board reviews the policies as per the indicated red lines and additions and changes, and you make a decision on the revisions, on the additions as noted within the board policies. For this particular series, I'd like to provide some additional context given the topic of these 2 board policies, as well as the added process that we've taken on to ensure alignment or recognize lack of alignment or agreement within these policies, that so that you as board members have the full picture and understanding of what we're asking when it comes to a first reading of these very important board policies. And so I'd like to start with a little bit of background information as to why we're bringing forth the changes to these particular board policies. Back in December of 2017, we entered into a resolution agreement with the Office for Civil Rights based on the fact that they found some significant disparity within racial groups, particularly Latino students and white students, as it pertained to our discipline, from referrals to in-school suspension. As a result of those findings, we entered into an agreement. And from December 2017 to the present, we've been working with the Office for Civil Rights to respond to each of the required elements that are contained within that agreement. One of those required elements is to update a number of various policies. For tonight, the 2 policies that we're addressing as part of the required element for updating is Board Policy 5144 and Board Policy 5144.1. The updating of board policies is indeed important. And I think we have to look at it through the context of the work that we're trying to do as a district, as opposed to an item merely to do it for compliance reasons. And so again, I bring to you that this is indeed connected to our promise of ensuring all our students are college and career ready. Maintaining students in their instructional learning environment is instrumental to their success and to us being able to keep that promise. It's also connected to our goal to build equitable Eastside communities. We definitely know that these 2 policies do indeed impact our ability to move forward with our push for building these equitable communities. We know that building equitable communities means that we are welcoming our students as they are, that we are looking at not only the strengths of our students, but their areas of growth, and not only knowing them, but supporting them, responding positively to the various needs that they bring, whether they be academic, social, emotional, behavior, or wellness, whatever those needs may be. And that when they are engaged in instruction, they're engaged in activities that are going to truly push them to develop those strategic thinking skills so that they can be full participants within their community and the global society. This is also very much aligned with the work that we're trying to do when we speak of responding as a system. One of the key elements of responding as a system is looking at policy. And so for today, that's the focus of this particular piece, is the policy changes that ultimately will impact access, that will ultimately impact the practices that we put in place towards that goal of building equitable communities so that we can then meet our promise of college and career readiness for each and every student. We also recognize that a lot of our board policies have overlap and have connection. Specifically, these are very much connected to the board policy that speaks to equity and to the specific definition of equity that we've put forth, and in particular to the obligation that I've brought forth to you before, which for us is that we will not allow for a student's gender, socioeconomic status, language proficiency, racial, ethnic group to predict failure or success. That it is the response of the system that should influence that outcome for those students. I also want to further show you the alignment and the importance of these policies in that it's connected to our LCAP work. One of the goals that we have within our LCAP is our goal of sustaining healthy, positive, safe learning environments for all our students. And so this is very much that policy component that will impact the access and the practice and will further support the work that we're hoping to do as part of our LCAP goals. You're familiar with the data. You've seen this before. So you can see that when it comes to our suspension rates, we have disparities from one group to another based on their race or ethnicity, as well as through the designated groups. And this particular data is the data that was also identified and found by the Office for Civil Rights that then entered us into that resolution agreement. So again, just wanting to offer you the context, the alignment, the importance of ensuring that we have policies that are going to allow us to do the work that we need to do to change these outcomes. You see that as of this year, we have the suspensions. And again, this was data that was pulled as of January. This is data that you've seen as part of the LCAP. Again, just providing you with further information so that you can see the alignment between the board policies and the expected outcomes that we're hoping to be able to target. And you can see the data as to where we currently are. Through this data piece, you can clearly see what the Office for Civil Rights noted, that we continue to have disproportionality when it comes to suspension. On the left-hand side, you see the demographic makeup of our students by race and ethnicity. And on the right-hand side, you see the percent of students who are suspended by race and ethnicity. If we were proportionate, those two graphs would align and would look very similar. In this case, you can see that where our Hispanic student population make up 40% of our total student population, yet they make up about 76, 77% of the students who are suspended. And then finally, in terms of data, you can see that there is disproportionality as it pertains to our designated populations, English learners, students with disabilities, our foster youth, as well as our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. I just wanted to kind of paint the picture, give to you some additional context and information in terms of how everything is connected within our system. So the process that we undertook to update these particular board policies. So there's been multiple meetings with the attorneys at the Office for Civil Rights to review existing language, make any additions or revisions that they found were necessary and that would be in compliance with the agreed upon resolution agreement. The policies were brought forth to Cabinet for review, actually about over a year ago, so that folks can review them, offer their input. I've had multiple meetings with ESTA leadership to review and discuss the policies, and specific to that action that I've taken, we were looking at the language for practicality, for intention. Is it going to support the work of the teachers? Is it feasible for the teachers to take this on? How does it read? So we looked at it for a number of things, not only language, but ability to actually implement and implement in a way that we were going to be able to be successful with the implementation. We had multiple points of input in both policies, as you've probably seen within the board policies themselves, that the input that was provided by the ESTA leadership was indeed accepted by OCR. So there was agreement. There was full agreement. Yes, we agree that this could be changed so that there's clear intention here or there's practicality here. And there was agreement. We went back and forth and those items were settled. There were, however, some points of input that were provided by ESTA leadership that have not been included in this particular reading, as they were not accepted for the Office for Civil Rights. And so there is still some areas that are lacking full agreement, and I want to bring those to your attention. I do want to note that some of the areas that are listed were brought forth after a meeting, a final meeting that was held with the Office for Civil Rights, where they approved that language. So I say that only to let you know that pending your decision, that what could be brought for a second reading can look a little different, because I would have to go back to the Office for Civil Rights to bring forth some of the input that was provided after I had to submit the necessary requirements to meet the deadlines for this particular board meeting. So for Board Policy 5144, there are, I believe, about 8 areas within that entire board policy where there's still some lack of full agreement or full alignment in terms of the language. The first one speaks to maintaining students in the classroom for learning. And in particular, the input or the feedback that was provided by ESTA leadership was around the term keeping students in the classroom learning. And I won't read the whole scenario that's listed there, but in essence, the concern there is that at some points, keeping a student in the classroom may not necessarily lead to learning. That keeping a student in the classroom is not necessarily always in the best interest of the student. And so you could read there from the input that's been provided, the concern that they have with that particular term, keeping students in the classroom learning. I do want to point out that the input that is provided from ISTA is word for word what was written in the comments. So I have not altered, I have not changed. This is particularly the words of ESTA leadership. In particular, I do just want to point out it's Thomas Brittendahl who's been the lead in meeting with me and going back and forth with reviewing the board policies, providing input. The next area is around other means of correction. And in particular, the greatest issue with this particular statement or this portion is the term only as a last resort. And so you could see that there's a lack of agreement there in that the use of the words only as a last resort is not found anywhere in Ed Code 48900.5. And so there's a request to have it be more aligned to that particular Ed Code. And so you could read there that some of the concerns that stem with that use of language is the lack of alignment with the Ed Code 48900.5. The next area where there's lacking full agreement is the area presented here, where we're talking about when repeated or serious behavior incidents occur, each school's multidisciplinary team will conduct. And so the lack of full agreement comes with the will conduct aspect of it, where the input that's provided is that it could maybe shift to is encouraged to, where there's a little bit more room for possibility of options as opposed to a definite stamp of thou shalt. The next area is specific to the disciplinary measures that may result in loss of instructional time. And the key area here that is of question is shall be imposed only when required by law. And so you can see there that the input is that there's a requirement within Ed Code that already places a requirement for the discipline of student behavior. But there is that 48900 series that doesn't necessarily place a requirement And so in their interpretation, this means that a student cannot be disciplined for anything other than the 5 behaviors. And so here, I believe it's a matter of how those words are interpreted and how we can further clarify so that there's a little bit more clarity as to what specifically that Ed Code 48900.5 says and allows for.
Question?
Yes.
So I haven't memorized Ed code. 48900, is that referring to those 5 mandatory?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't think oh, the proposed policy says that shall be imposed only when required by law or when other means of correction has been documented to have failed. So the concern is that this takes away the board's discretion or the administration's discretion to
Discipline.
use well, this is particularly regarding to, well, it does say actually suspension.
Yeah, so I think the concern here, if going back to just our discussions with Thomas and Jack as representatives of the teachers in their leadership group, I think it's the limitations that some of the language they feel may impose on an ability to hold students accountable and provide certain discipline measures. So I think it's a matter of allowing for further discussion to look at what exactly is within the Ed code and what exactly is allowed within those Ed codes. I think when you read at the terminology here, the addition of or when other means of correction have been documented to have failed, it does actually allow for us to be able to take disciplinary action as long as we have documented that there's measures that we have taken before excluding students from instruction.
So my recollection of speaking with Kenya Edison, who was he talked about suspension, and I'm really just bringing this as because I don't know, I want to be educated, but she seemed to indicate that there was times when suspension wasn't. Things are really heated and there just needs to be some time. That would that meet the definition of this?
Yeah, I think part of what may be happening is just the interpretation of the language and a full understanding of what we can or cannot do. I think if you look holistically at the various portions of the policies as well as Ed code, there's always the or as needed, or if it poses, there's the addition of those possibilities where suspension can indeed be used if that is the best appropriate response for that particular situation. And so I think there's, still, of course, an opportunity. This is the first reading, an opportunity to go back and make sure that we iron out what the intent is, that OCR is in agreement, and that we clarify maybe some of the misalignments or the areas that are lacking full agreement to be able to, reach a point where there's less areas where we're lacking full agreement. And I have to say, and Thomas and I have been working very closely. We understand that there's these points of full agreement that, to be honest with you, we haven't had enough time to go through each and every one of these points. However, excuse me, with the timeline and expectation that we have from Office for Civil Rights, being that this has been in review for over a year, we needed to show progress and we needed to make sure that we brought it forth to you as board members so that you were informed as well as the community to the progress that we're making where we are. And really, when you look at the depth of the existing policy, to have 8 areas that are lacking full agreement, I think is a good starting point.
Pretty incredible.
Being that we can come back for a second reading and adjust any misunderstandings, any questions around what is really the intent. Let's clarify what Ed code says here. Is there pieces that aren't matching between 5144 and 5144.1, and then be able to come back with you with something that hopefully has either 0 areas where we're lacking full agreement or less than the 8, at least for this particular one. And I think there's maybe 4 or 5 for the second one.
So we're hearing this tonight because of a timeline that we committed to. But we could actually, this could actually go to 3 readings if it needed to.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, I want to commend everybody for the great progress on this. And you know, obviously, I think I speak for the board when we're always looking for alternatives to exclusionary practices. And, you know, that we've all talked about how that's a balance, right? And weighing out individual and this body safety and staff safety with where we have as many instructional minutes as possible, right?
Yes.
Right.
So you can see the other areas. I won't go into much detail. I think they're pretty self-explanatory in terms of what some of the questions are around key areas. A lot of it is around language use and what the intent actually is, as well as ensuring that teachers don't lose their autonomy within their classroom to be able to manage classroom behaviors in a way that is going to continue to provide a positive learning environment and also keep students you know, as appropriate in the classroom learning so that there is minimal loss of instructional time within the classrooms. So I'll go ahead and jump to 5144.1. And there's a few areas there. And I think what you'll notice is in some cases, it's just a matter of language and word use. And so the first area is around the use of the words fairly and equally. And discussion around switching that to the word of the term impartially. And so I know that's something that has been in discussion that actually the Office for Civil Rights was looking at agreeing to in terms of shifting that language. I believe we actually did switch it in the 5144. And so it would make sense to be able to make that shift in the 5144.1 for alignment purposes in terms of terms that are being used.
Where would that word go?
In place of fairly and equally, it would be impartially. And then the next areas, I think you'll see it's a lot of it is making sure there's alignment with the 5144. And again, I want to say that a lot of this came after the meeting with the timeline with OCR to submit that documentation for meeting the timelines for this board meeting. And so there is indeed some of the areas here that were brought forth for the 5144.1 that do indeed need alignment with 5144. So I do recognize that aspect of it, that this particular area is actually language that was identical in the 5144 that was changed, but it was not changed in the 5144.1. So obviously this would be something that we would have to come back to and adjust. And then the following areas you could see, again, it's a matter of looking at aligning it with the language of 5144 as well as the UBR, right? We have a UBR that contains some language. So looking at what's the best way to make sure that all of our documentation is aligned. And so the last piece that I will say is that OCR, as I said, has been working with us for over a year, well, more than a year, but particularly on these 2 board policies for more than a year. The current language as it's been presented to you is what has been approved for a first reading by the Office for Civil Rights. You can see through the presentation the areas where there is a lack of alignment, but I think for a second reading, you can definitely come back and I hope to be able to bring back to you, like I said, either 0 areas of where there's lack of agreement or less than what you see here, in particular for the 5144.1 board policy, which there is definitely a need for alignment on that particular policy with policy 5144. I do, however, at this time, I'm going to ask for the Board of Trustees to accept this for reading of Board Policies 5144 and Board Policy 5144.1.
I don't think we have to do that, right?
First reading, right?
Yeah,
The
first
first-
reading. Yeah,
we just have
I
to
don't know
do
if you
it.
have to accept it first reading or you just, do you take action now? Okay,
I have,
perfect. Perfect.
Good evening, once again. Name's Jack Hamner, President of Eastside Teachers Association. First off, I just wanted to thank Teresa for all the hard work. I mean, this is all this, OCR meetings and the board policies and revising and all that is excruciating as far as how long it takes and stuff. So thank you for that. Secondly, is the other thing that we all appreciate as far as Eastside teachers is the ability to be partners in the process. In the old days when we were frustrated in the way things went, it was, hey, here's what we're going to do, and this is what it is. And there was this huge confrontation and struggle, and it made it very complicated and very frustrating. And now with the shift in the mindset that we have and the shift in mindset that the district management has taken on, it's awesome to be able to see both sides, see the other side, their perspective, and see our perspective, and try to find really what's best in the interest of not only our kids, but our teachers, and for everybody being safe in the classroom and being able to learn. And that's really, what this is all about, is doing whatever we can so that our students are safe in class and then can get the best education that they can. And it takes a lot of work, but I think the work in the end will pay off. And so I thank Thomas Brittendall for taking a big part of this. Greg Boyd, Becky Hopkins, and myself have also met with Teresa a few times to discuss a lot of these things, as well as student discipline. And the other thing that I will mention is there has been, obviously this year coming back to school full time has been, very trying for everybody. And there's just been a lot of, things that have gone on. And one of the hot topics at a lot of the schools is, school discipline, student behavior, and teacher response to those behaviors and all of that. So what I wanted you to know is we don't have anything complete yet, but we worked up a teacher survey on, the campus safety for the teachers. We also have people that are working on a survey for students and parents about how they feel about student discipline, student safety as well. We would be more than happy to share this, information when it becomes available. The staff survey has been out for maybe a week, maybe just since Monday, I believe. So it's really not ready to put out at this time. The numbers aren't big enough, to be really valid. We're getting close. We're up to about 450, I believe. And so hopefully we will have something to go out to the parents and the students as well, so we can get those perspectives. We will be having overall data as far as what people say, but we also will have school by school data, so we can look at, certain schools think that this is more of an issue, and this school might think that something else is more of an issue. So we can kind of get to the details as far as what schools have these certain problems, so we can try to identify those and help work to solve those problems. So thank you, everybody, for that.
For members of the board, any further comments or questions?
I do. but you don't.
Go ahead. Vice President Chen.
so just want to reiterate the comments of a few people, just so much gratitude and appreciation for the time and energy that went into this. There's nothing like communicating, engaging to get to an outcome that benefits everybody to the best of our ability to support our students ultimately. So just thank you for that. I have a question on the overall process. So this is the first reading. There will be a second one for sure, maybe a third one. In the second reading, where will our iteration look different by then? Will we have, will you have had the opportunity to engage with OCR to incorporate any edits? Because it sounds like there was that came in after the fact.
Yes, so actually I have a actually, I have a meeting set up already with them tomorrow. And so I will be bringing forth the additional requests for changes, or we'll be able to have a discussion. So yes, I anticipate that the second reading will look different than what you currently have in front of you, based on, like I said, some of the input that I'm pretty positive will be accepted by the Office for Civil Rights, just in the simple fact that there's language that was contained in 5144 that was word for word the same in 5144.1, but wasn't adjusted. Just we didn't have that opportunity based on that input.
Okay. Some things that I thought as I was reading. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me go back to my notes. Okay. One of the things that I've seen more and more, and I think this is some intentionality that's going on here, is the connections between LCAP, MTSS, not as sometimes naming it, sometimes not, but describing the system, which I think is important as we support our staff to interpret and figure out what exactly does this mean versus saying, oh, do MTSS. What does that mean? Right. So I wanted to note that. As I'm hearing this whole conversation and seeing notes here and there, things that are coming up for me is there is a disconnect between the intent, the interpretation, and skill to deliver, right? And I think part of this gets to that, but a question that I'm leaving with is how, like, what systems are going to be in place to support building the capacity of our staff to execute on this? Some of it is here noted, but isn't fully fleshed out. And I know some policies have administrative regulations, some don't. Is there an administrative regulation tied to this to support that?
Yes, there is. And then also too, when you look at the connection, the reason for me bringing forth the LCAP is there's a lot of the action items that are listed within the LCAP that speak to that professional development, right? For the most part, board policies are intended to be a little bit more broader in the sense of not naming very specifically restorative practice training, for example, or trauma-informed practices, professional development. I think the wording that is used is a menu, right? A menu of professional development to build the capacity of the teachers to be able to respond to students' needs based on behavior. And so when you then look at that aspect and look at what we have contained within our LCAP, I think you can see that within the LCAP, we have the various structures and action items that are put in place to be able to provide that building of the capacity. And one of those things is obviously the work that we're going to do around multi-tier systems of support at the tier 1 level, right? One of the components of the tier 1 level multi-tiered systems of support is the behavior and social emotional aspect of it, combined with the academic. But when you hone in specifically on the behavior aspect of it, it's, what are those school-wide expectations that students need to know and be acknowledged for that's going to help build healthier school environments. That's contained within the goals of the LCAP. And so the training that is listed within the LCAP is, as I mentioned, restorative practices, trauma-informed practices. We still have a lot of work to do around the UBR, right? Making sure that there's a common understanding of what we mean when we say X or Y, what that looks like within the classroom, what that looks like outside of the classroom, and what those responses. Another thing that we need to identify is the interventions, right? when suspension is the only intervention or response that you have, our data looks the way it looks, right? So what are those interventions that we need to put in place to ensure that we have those other means of correction to work within the students? And in the absence of that, our response tends to be that exclusionary practice. And so, yeah, there's still a lot of work to be able to do to put in place those interventions at the tier 1 level that happen inside the classroom and outside of the classroom as well.
Yeah, no, you alluded to the LCAP, and I'm in alignment. The LCAP is like a 300-page document. It's daunting.
52.
52? Which
Maybe.
one was the one we went over, Glenn? That was like a few hundred pages.
Yeah, they've continued to adapt it and get it down to
Okay,
52.
that was this last version, but regularly every other year, it's like
adjusted, yeah.
It's just for this year. So
Mhm.
that's what's to be expected ongoing,
Yeah.
right? It's, yeah, even if it were just consistently 52, that's a lot better, but it's still like,
It's still daunting. It is a huge document, yes.
yeah. And in this document on page 5, we start, like the last sentence is each semester, each site team shall identify at least one goal specific to enhancing equitable school behavior intervention strategies. And that for me, I'm like, yes. And then what happens? When are we gonna, what does it mean after we identify that, right? It's like, start ID some of the stuff and then we just stop. That's why I was like, well, this feels to me like we're going into AR, but maybe not. And so I wonder when we do the second reading, if we can like, I don't know, package that a little bit.
And there was, I mean, the previous iterations contained a lot more specificity, but those were some of the areas of the give and take in terms of practicality, in terms of not being tied down to a specifically named PD that may or may not change as we progress through the years, right? The board policy is intended to be, like I said, a little bit more broader, guide the work, and then it's potentially the AR sometimes, but really more specifically, it's the plans that we put in place, right? And so when you look at it through that graphic of the systems response, the policy, right, is one of those aspects that will hopefully allow us to refer back and say, okay, we are putting in place this practice or this procedure. And within practice, I'm using it loosely to also include our PD, our building of capacity, that we can leverage the policy and say, yes, right? The policy says that we are going to include a menu of professional developments that respond to And so here's how we're putting it in practice.
Yeah.
More specifically.
This is broad enough, but it doesn't close the loop. This leaves us to talk about the stuff over and over again, but not necessarily come back to it.
What do you mean by come back to it? Come back to what?
So each site shall identify at least one goal at the end of the semester, and that's it.
So the goals are what Mr. Vanderty has been speaking about. When the school sites come and present to you, part of their goals is the alignment within the single plan for student achievement, right? We have our safety plans, which are actually going to come to the board April 28th. And then the schools have their single plan for student achievement. There's goals within that are in alignment with the LCAP. And so you will see in the goals within the single plan for student achievement that sites are taking what we're saying within the LCAP and saying, okay, how does this apply specifically to my site? When I look at my site data and I see the disproportionality, what's the goal that I'm going to include as it pertains to behavior responses that are specific to my sites in alignment with the overarching LCAP aspect of it. And so the closing of the loop comes in, well, let me put it this way. So the flow is we have the LCAP, right, which clearly identifies our district-wide goals with how we're going to measure it, the actions and the expenditures and resources that we're going to put in place. The sites, through their school site council, through their meeting with staff, through their instructional leadership sessions, meet and say, hey, here at the school, our data is actually very similar to that of the district, or it may not, right? In some of our sites, it may not. And so how are we here at Overfelt High School, Mount Pleasant High School, Independence High School, Evergreen Valley High School? What are we looking to improve, right? What is our data telling us that we need to make sure that we improve? Hey, it's very similar to the district. We need to have responses to behavior because we also are experiencing disproportionality with these specific groups, or we have this issue at hand. So when we look at that, what are those specific actions that we're going to take? How am I as a principal going to message the work that I need to do, not only to my teachers, but to my students and my community. And then how am I going to leverage the LCAP, leverage the board policy to then be able to put in place the things that I need to put in place at my site, given the data. So the closing of the loop comes in, do we have fidelity to whatever we're going to implement? And are we shifting the outcomes, right? And so here's the goal. Here's how we're going to measure it. Here's the outcome. And hopefully we're seeing changes based on the actions that we put forth in the goal. And so if I'm understanding you correctly, what you mean by closing the loop, that's how I see, I guess, closing the loop within the work or the actions that we're going to put in place. But I may be misunderstanding you what you mean by closing the loop.
That lives in your brain, Teresa. I don't see that here. You know, or maybe it doesn't belong here. I think you said that at some
And
point.
it doesn't. That's why I'm
So-
saying it doesn't belong there, because a board policy has to allow for Teresa not being here.
Exactly.
A board policy has to allow for the shift of staff that comes through, the shift in data, the shift in research-based practices that come out. I think what is currently within the language, specific to some of the items that you're calling out, allows for those shifts, right? Because it just says, describe a menu of this, determine a data protocol for establishing this, right? And so those data protocols are going to happen within the shifts that happen in the LCAP. We can name them there, the shifts that happen in the SPSA, the professional development that we choose to put in place. Ideally, we want to pick a data protocol that will be sustainable, that is research-based, but as with everything in education, things change.
Yeah. Where is that though? What everything that you're saying, where is that? So that we know, regardless of whether Teresa or Glenn or whoever is here, that continues.
It's in the LCAP. It's in the LCAP. It's in sites, individual SPSAs. It's in the processes and procedures that we have in place at various levels for various pieces and components. And to be honest, we haven't gotten to the data protocol piece. That's still a work in progress. I can't tell you that we have an established data protocol that we use for reviewing data at the sites. We don't have the protocol. We review the data. I've gone out and I have met with site administrators to say, hey, how many of, using the early warning system, how many of your kids are on that, and how do we address them? What does Kirsten King, the Director of Assessment Accountability, has already shared out school sites individual data reflective of the district, but for individual school data, so that they can engage with their school community around development of the goals based on the data that they see. And so the data protocol that you're looking for is not established yet. There's many out there, but we have not established a key one that we can say district-wide, this is how we analyze data.
Then maybe that's a conversation that we need to continue in
Yeah,
conjunction with.
and
this
we're
on
having,
the side.
yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because that's what this prompted for me. I'm like, oh, there's this part that's missing, which is exactly what you just said. And the fact that we started going into some detail, I'm like, okay, so then where's that last step, right? Okay. Thank you.
Board President, we do have two speakers that would like to speak on this item.
Okay, please proceed.
First speaker is Lucila Ortiz.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent. Hello, everyone. My name is Lucila Ortiz. I am the Organizing Director with Californians for Justice. First of all, wanted to thank all staff, especially Teresa, who have been engaged in this conversation and doing this work. I mean, it's very evident that there's been a lot of work and sweat being put into this process. So really want to thank for your work on this. I also wanted to take the chance to uplift that through various conversations that we've had with our students over and over. We've had focus groups, we had surveys. One of the main things that came up for our students is racial justice and specifically implementing restorative practices in the district, right? And so I just wanted to uplift that this is really aligned with what we've been hearing from the students, and the students are really eager to see a policy like this being implemented in the district. I also just wanted to highlight that it is important that we continue to engage with the students in this conversation, right? And so I'm not advocating that we continue to delay this process because I think it's already been a long time to get here. But I do want to make sure that we are continuing to engage the students as any other member of the school community in any conversations that have to do with safety. I think it's really critical that we include them as well, and that we have their voice in being able to define what safety means for them and how they would like to be treated when behavior issues come up as well. So that's just a comment that I would like to uplift. Again, thank you so much, staff, for all your work on this, and thank you for allowing me to speak on this item.
The other member who's raised her hand is Clazel Sewell.
Sorry, where are we with comments? Oh, you're done with comments. Okay, let me just also check in with our student governing board representative. Any comments you wish to offer?
Yeah, similar to what like the students have been saying, and what has been like kind of iterated, but I think it's so important to like focus on like what students are saying. Like I know you've got like ESTA input and you're hearing from like different levels of the district, but I feel like it's really important to talk to the students, especially at like the schools that are most impacted and like have a lot of suspensions, because I think when we need to ask students like what's going on, right? And like how can we like support you? And I think it's really important like when we're like trying to like plan out our goals. Like I don't know how like the how this board policy would work, but I think it's really important to like name like the specifics to like what exactly are the interventions are being offered. How is that going to be done? Who's going to be responsible for that? Who's going to be responsible for checking in with students? I think something else too is just like the specifics on how we respond to certain scenarios. Like I think we're going to respond to a student who like steals stuff differently to someone who has been like harassing another student, right? I think we need to like really differentiate that, because like I think it's not like a one size fits all thing. Like we need to like really like focus on like how we're gonna address specific issues and like identify certain student needs. And that's gonna differ for everyone. Like it's not gonna be an easy thing, right? But it's something that we're gonna need to do if we have these goals in mind. I think centering restorative practices, like I think we do have like those goals in mind, but I think it's the means of like implementing them and holding them true, while also like getting like staff, students, and families all on the same level and making sure that like we have that communication present.
Thank you very much, Member Cortez.
Yeah, I too want to acknowledge the amazing work from various stakeholders to get to this point. And it's really an incredible, I mean, it was music to my ears to really read the document and see all the restorative practices and whatnot that we are including in it. I just wanted to share not too many, it's a couple of very specific comments, but just in general, I want to just name the tensions that we're holding here, right? So the thing about keeping students in the classroom learning, I mean, we want that. We want our students, we want them to have as many instructional minutes as possible. We want them included in instruction, what's happening in the classroom as much as possible. I kind of understand the alternate point of view of saying, is really learning really happening? And maybe that's where we emphasize it. If a student is really not in a place to learn, I don't know how you assess that. If a student, I don't know, but I just see that there's tension there, right? The student is not in a mindset to learn and is still maybe in an upset or being disruptive, or I don't know how to hold that, but I just want to show that is acknowledge the tension and also affirm the board's overall position that we want to keep kids in the classroom learning. I think also the language only as a last resort also conveys the sentiment of the board member, especially this board member, regarding exclusionary practices. We do not want, like, the only tool in my tool bag is an exclusionary practice, right? So I do want to acknowledge that. And I also acknowledge the tension between, offering very specific remedies versus teacher discretion. And for me, it comes down to, does discretion address the disproportionate outcomes we've been seeing? So there's that tension, like how much, I do think it's important to, teaching is a very, I just know this even as a substitute, it's a very fluid, dynamic thing that, and you have to be on your feet and literally responding in the moment. So I recognize that. And yet we do need to, if you keep doing what you always did, you'll keep getting what you always got. So we do need to make some changes. And so I just appreciate that your commitment to continue to work these things out. I have a couple of really nitpicky things. Not really, literally a couple, two. And actually it's kind of the same philosophy. I tend to like in documents, especially that are outward facing, to the public, that we spell out acronyms so that the documents are more accessible. So a couple of times when we say UBR, my preference would be that we just say Uniform Behavioral Response. And then on page 3 of 5144.1, we reference LEP parents, and I forget what LEP stands for, but my preference would be, could we just spell that out?
Yes, we can definitely look at spelling out the acronyms.
Really appreciate Associate Superintendent Jared Marcus for the presentation. And I was want to echo with the board trustee Perico Dizzy, is that not one size fit all, right? And we have a different level of student who want to engage, or different level of the student who achieve their goals, or some of them probably or exceed their goals. So that is something that I really want to look into, want to talk about equity, because we have to work with every student and not neglect some student that they say, okay, they already exceed their goals, so leave them alone. And we want to just only support, only the student that need help. So I was wondering that, for the student that really have high achievement, do we have any other avenue to support them, to continue to support them? Not that they feel that, all right, hey, we're looking to a different way. How can we support in a different ways? And also I want to acknowledge that President of ESTA mentioned about safety for our staff or teachers in order to really support our student in the classroom. And I know that board president Rera and I, we went to visit, Independence, and we heard from our teachers and what the concern that we want to feel that is safety of teachers, staff, student, parents that are our main primary concern. So I just want to acknowledge that, and I want to see that, maybe in a different way that we want, because I overheard, in the time that, all right, we don't pay attention to those high achievement students, then we look into this way to support most the one that needed more help.
Thank you.
That concludes your comments?
Yes, last piece, I just want to thank as the leadership, in particular, Jack Habner and Thomas Brittendorf for collaborating with me. It truly has been a collaborative process. We are able to meet in a space where if we disagree, we disagree. And so I just want to thank both Thomas and Jack for working with me to build that space so that we can continue to have these discussions and really in a way that is collaborative. And in particular, just thanks to Thomas Brentendahl, because he has spent an enormous amount of time looking through with the fine tooth comb, I know that, through each of the board policies and making sure that he's provided input without expecting any kind of compensation or anything. So just thank you to Thomas and Jack for allowing me to work collaboratively with them. Thank you.
Convinced that Thomas Brittendahl has broken the code for cloning oneself because he does so much. I don't know how he does it, but thank you, Jack, and thank you, Tom, Jack Hamner and Thomas Brittendahl. Members of the board, any other comments before we move on? If not, I'm going to continue with, where are we? Item 13.01. Approved contracts for professional services over 25,000.
Move to approve.
Moved by Cortese, seconded by Doe. Do I hear you, Mr. Doe? Okay, seconded by member Lay. Student representative, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Okay, members of the board, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed and abstentions and
And just kind of to make a comment. So some of the items on here are for graduations that I understand are being reimbursed by ticket sales or ASB funds or things like that, right?
That's correct.
wasn't, we'd still go. Where are we? 14, no items on under 14 or under 15 on the consent calendar, members of the board.
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Cortese, second by Chavez for the consent calendar. All in favor? Oops, member, student board member, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And members of the board, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Yep, okay, thank you. Abstentions, and it passes unanimously. On to item 22, future agenda items 22.01, opportunity for Board of Trustees to request items on the future agenda.
I'd like to request,
Member Lay, you have.
yes, I'd like to request some presentation of English learners progress during the COVID-19 until now. I know that, when I visit, prior years, English learners department has been working very hard to support those ESL students. And I really want to see if in the presentation, to see any progress, any obstacle, any challenge, for our ESL students.
Okay, if there are no other requests,
I have a
member Cortese.
clarification. So I made a request for a report about mental health services, and specifically what I'd like to see is the funding structure for mental health. Like, how many of our,
I just want to clarify that we've moved now on to 22.02, future items, and under that is the mental health. We were on 22.01, I hadn't yet announced.
oh my God, my apologies. I thought we were on, I'm
I
sorry.
don't want to confuse the viewing audience. So we can do that. Item 22.02, future items, and member Cortese is referencing one of those items listed.
Apologize. Are we done with the other one?
No,
Oh,
no, we're not.
No, we're
No,
not.
we're not.
Okay, we're still on 22.01,
Yeah.
opportunities for Board of Trustees to request items on future agendas. Member Chavez, Vice President Chavez.
Oh.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is like an actual agenda or this is something that we continue the conversation. This is going off of our board policy conversation on looking on the data and closing the loop. Is that something we continue? Because it's not like you can give a report on that per se.
I think what we'll do is we'll talk to see how we can structure a visual or some type to show you how we go from our vision for our policy, for our goals, to our capacity building, and then how our data works and how those are all synced up and provide something for us to see the alignment?
That's not what I'm asking for.
And I'm missing that.
Yeah, it's the last part on closing the loop piece. This is part of like a structure thing. Because I think we do everything else is being done except this part. There's no consistent way of doing it. And I think that's where there is a big opportunity.
So can you explain more? What part, when you say this part, what is that part that you're looking to close the loop on?
So when we do an analysis on, for example, when I was referring to the board policy, right? We said, okay, we look at data, we focus on one thing, right? And then that was it, it got dropped off. And then we started talking about the system and all the different ways and things that we do and where different things are at, the LCAP, and we started naming a lot of things. And at the end, you're like, well, yeah, this part is missing. And when I heard this part missing was closing the loop with data to see like, what did we accomplish? Where did we fall short? What does that mean for next steps? Like that last piece. Or
So
did
I think we do,
misunderstand?
no, I think we do have that though. I think when I come to the board and I present, for example, and I'll use the LCAP. In particular this year, I think if you remember, I showed you when I came to give you the update, I showed you the goal, the action items, the data that where we're currently at, and then the expenditures for that, right? And so we have the goal, how we plan to meet that goal, and how we're gonna measure it. So then when I come back the following year, I then give to you, okay, this was the goal. These were the action items. Now here's the data, here's the outcome. Hey, we still haven't moved much, but we've made progress here, or we haven't made progress there. And we are, in the progress of this. And so now we're adding this, or we're taking away that because we recognize that that isn't giving us the outcomes that we're hoping to see. And so to me, the LCAP process, I think if the way we've leveraged it now, it actually does allow us to go into kind of that cycle of inquiry where it's like we're planning, we're reviewing data, then we're revising, then we're taking action, and then we're planning again. So when you say close the loop in education, you can't really ever close the loop because it's an ongoing progress of continuing to move kids based on the data that we demonstrate and that we come back to. What I said was missing was an actual data protocol that we can have sites use where we can say as a district, this is the data protocol that we use to analyze data, right? Whether it is that, it could be like a data protocol where you look and you ask, and I think I took the board at one of the board retreats through this, right? I asked you to reflect and I asked you to look at one, how does the data on the onset make you feel? Just what are those emotions that make you feel? What about the organization do you feel is contributing to these? And so what would be then some responses to that? So that is an example of a data protocol that we can use to be able to analyze the data, to analyze, is it a result of a lack of fidelity to the model of implementation? Is it a lack of appropriate action items that we're taking? Is it a lack of enough resources and funding that's being provided so that we can then identify what are the things that need to be changed?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm referring to, Teresa. And I understand that the district is huge, right? And it might mean like this protocol might look slightly different in different spaces for different things, right? Because right now we're talking about responses to behavior, right? That's not to say that we shouldn't be looking at things similarly, but I think there's a lot of power to just making that more of like the regular. I don't hear that a lot. Right? Yeah, sure. We have experiences here and as a high level, we, talk about it as a district. I also am not in your shoes when you engage with each school site individually, whether it's through data protocols or something else. But I think that is a very powerful piece that I haven't heard much of. And so that's what I'm asking for. Like, is that something that we would be discussing here as an item? Or is that something that we discuss out?
I mean, we could discuss it in terms of here's the data protocol that we've adopted or decided to use, and here's how it's working, across our sites. But I think the one thing that I did say is we don't have that yet, right? We're not
Yeah.
there at that point to do that. Do we have a variety of data to look at? Oh my goodness, yes. Kristen King does an amazing job. I mean, even if we honed in and we said, okay, we're gonna truly use the early warning system to identify, because that one, you don't need this elaborate data protocol to be able to identify and look at, okay, these kids are the ones that are at risk. So then what's our response? Every 6 weeks we get that, right? And so that's an easy enough thing to look at and say, what are our responses? Why is this kid at risk? Is it behavior, attendance, or academics, or is it all three? And then what is the appropriate response to that? And if we see enough patterns being built, then that informs us like, hey, as a district, here's the approach we need to take because we've identified these patterns within the data.
We'll add the item.
I'm sorry? Why? Because we can talk about this for hours.
We could. It's not agenda.
That conclude your comment?
Yeah, we'll add the item.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes item 22.01. Moving on to 22.02, and I'm going to come back to the comments that Member Cortese was offering regarding mental health services. Member Cortese, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I kind of jumped the gun because I thought I was requesting an item, but I was actually just clarifying that I already requested. So what I'm looking for in terms of, I mean, all of these things that you wrote down are great. I'd be interested in that, but I really want to understand the funding piece of mental health. So I know that we have 2 social workers per school site, and I don't know how many interns we have, but that would be interesting to know. And I know that we have seen quite a number of referrals for a request for mental health support from our students. And I don't know how many of those, so if a student requests some counseling support, how many of those are seen by our actual social workers? How many are seen by our interns? How many are referred out? And then when we see the students ourselves, do we get reimbursed by Medi-Cal or insurance, or how is there any reimbursement that we are currently participating in with regard to those services? So, and then I know we also have mental health service partners, and is there a financial relationship there? Like, do we pay them to see our students, and is there any reimbursement through Medi-Cal of that expense, or do they bill Medi-Cal or insurance directly? Or I just would like to know a little better about all of that. Thank you.
A further comment on item 22.02. That takes us to the end of our meeting. Item 23.01, comments by members of the board. I'm going to start to my left with Vice President Lorena Chavez.
Yes, so quick announcement out there. There will be an audit committee, right, Mr. Doe, this Tuesday at 6 p.m. So that's an invitation to the community. Please attend. The agenda is already posted online. I also had the pleasure of attending the Pitch Awards with 2 of my colleagues in Glenn yesterday. It was awesome. It was really great to see students actually pitch the CTE programs, right? And their creativity is amazing and really cool to see. So thank you to all the staff that put that together. There's a lot. I'm not going to remember everybody's names, but you know who you are. Keep up the good work. And there's nothing more powerful than to have the students at the center of it, just uplifting our work.
Moving on to Member Cortez.
I mean, I just am feeling so grateful for the work of this administration and the collaboration that you're building and the efforts by folks in leadership roles to be intentional about building that collaboration. I just want to acknowledge that and lift that up. Thank you.
Yes, Member Lay.
Yes, I would like to say that I want to thank you, teacher and staff, especially for the BSA of YB Yoba Buena High School. They had the invitation I attend with board member Doe. And I have to say that our students are very talented. I would like, I don't want to miss any event. I know that I have very busy schedule, but they done just an excellent job, and they want to keep the tradition and also involve and engage other group to perform and share the culture. And I want to mention this. I'm also involved in the Rotary San Jose East and Evergreen for scholarship. And I know that they will work with Associate Superintendent Teresa Marquez and the Glenn Vandersey to send out those application to school to help our student to receive the scholarship for, I believe it's 8,000 for 2 years scholarship. And they also want to support for those students that still enter into their career as well as, credential. And I'm so involved in Work to Future. And I know that we really want to support our student coming the next summer class, then they want to have a job. So I really appreciate our staff, Team Win, have been involved with and support those career as well as this opportunity for our student. So that's all I have. Thank you, Board President.
Thank you. Member Doe, who's online.
Thank you, President Herrera. I just want to express my gratitude for the administrations and the collaborative work effort with our staff. Thank you very much. And thank you to Superintendent Marquez and ESTA leadership for their work on their hard work. Thanks a lot.
Our student board representative.
I wanted to give a shout out to Californians for Justice, who's collecting lost student input on LCAP. And if any students are interested, they're holding a meeting a virtual meeting next Tuesday to garner student input. So I thought that was really cool because, a really big amount, that's a big amount of money that our district is receiving. I think it's really important to garner that student input. And I also want to bring awareness to the fact that it's National Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I think we need to take forward that as a district, make sure that our students feel safe on campus and that we're doing everything to not only address sexual assault, but ensure that there are preventative measures to make sure that students feel safe on campus and are aware of their Title IX rights.
Thank you. Moving on to our administration, Mr. Superintendent.
Yeah, I want to echo that. And early in the year, we learned that some of the issues of COVID were very dear and that our students needed a lot of access to social workers, and some that were having troubles just adjusting to being back on campus and recognizing authority and things like that. We've managed to get other groups on campus and work towards those ends. But we've also learned that there's other issues that are present in our students' life right now. And so one of those is the issue of consent. Another is appropriate use of social media, and also in some instances opiate use. And so just to reaffirm that our ed services and the administration is looking to find trainings on those areas and lift those things up, not just to one grade level, but across our system. And that definitely want to make sure that our students are getting the proper information and also the resources to be able to take action for themselves and in support of each other in our community.
Board meeting evaluation. Any comments, members of the board? It is 8:01, which is a remarkable time, and that's one comment in and of itself for the conduct of the board meeting. Any other comments?
I appreciated the focus of the meeting was around, I think we addressed a very, very meaty item around discipline and disproportionality. So I think that is very good use of board and this administration team's time.
Thank you. If there's no further comments, I'm going to proceed to item 24.01, legal counsel report on closed session actions.
Good evening, board. Closed session item 2.04. The board unanimously approved the employment of Stephanie Palmieri Farias as coordinator of student services for the district. There are no further reportable actions.
Thank you. That brings us to an adjournment of the meeting. So good night to everyone.